So this video is going to be a game changer and really challenge the way you look at the relationship between activity, weight loss, and building muscle. So a lot of people over the years will talk about the weight that they put on whenever they're not active and doing less. But is that really true? And does activity, or lack of activity for that matter, have anything to do with building muscle? So here's my experience. I train 3 times a week with high intensity workouts that last anywhere between 10, 15 to 20 minutes. And with that training, I was able to go from 125 pounds to realizing my goal of being a successful natural bodybuilder. And I've trained this way for the past 33 years, and I'll look like this a full 20 years after my last natural bodybuilding competition. And before the pandemic, I had a pretty hectic schedule. I'd wake up, go train clients, come back home, then go out and train clients again. And that would give me activity levels somewhere around 10,000 to 12,000 steps every single day. But the pandemic happened, gyms closed, I'm training from home, I'm training clients online, and my daily activity because of the lockdown goes from 12,000 to 10,000 steps per day to only about 2,500 to 3,000 steps a day max. Major difference. And because I train with high intensity for only just about an hour a week, you would imagine that that drastic drop in overall activity would mean that I would gain a lot of weight. But what actually happened will surprise you. So I know you want to know what happened, so stay tuned. Let's talk more about that. So in this video, we're talking about the relationship between activity and weight loss, fat loss, and muscle building. Namely, what happened when the lockdown made it such that I went from an activity level of having about 10 to 12,000 steps per day to only 2,500 to 3,000 steps per day, training in both cases for only about an hour a week. But before I go any further, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, especially those who are one-stop place for anyone who's training naturally without drugs or steroids. Thank you so much, and do be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you're first line to get the new content as it comes out. So the suspense is building. I know you want to know what happened, and here's exactly what happened. When my activity level plummeted, I lost body fat, lost weight, and was more muscular. When the lockdown started, I weighed exactly 207 pounds. And I was able to drop down to somewhere around 203 to 205 pounds with less activity. When I dropped down from 207 to 205, 203, I didn't get smaller. I saw myself getting more defined and also hardening up at the same time. And here's the most important part, and something you're not going to see very often. My diet was exactly the same. I'm the person who eats exactly the same thing every day, day in, day out. My diet doesn't change. I never have cheat meals. I don't indulge in junk food. I don't stray off my diet. Everything stays exactly the same. And my caloric intake, when I was averaging an activity level of somewhere between 12,000 to 10,000 steps per day, running up and down, to going to only 2,500 to 3,000 steps per day, were exactly the same, no different. And that's extremely important because, like I said at the beginning, a lot of people blame inactivity for their weight gain over time. But the problem is, in almost every single of those situations, those people didn't track exactly what they ate, and they didn't eat exactly the same things every single day. So there's no real control to figure out what exactly caused that weight gain. And in my experience, weight gain is completely dietary related. It is not activity related. Now, some of you out there might think that that doesn't make sense, but here's the problem with thinking that way. Science isn't about explanations, nor is science about things making sense. Science is about repeatable outcomes. And here's the important part. This isn't an isolated incident by any stretch of the imagination. It's what I have seen time and time again with my clients and people I'm training over the course of 3 decades. In fact, I'll give you another scenario which perfectly encapsulates it. I work with a lot of dancers over the years, going to dance school, dancing pretty much every single day in, day out, 6-7 days a week. They leave dance school, and on leaving dance school, they literally have a drop in their overall activity level all the time they're training with high intensity workouts that last maximum less than an hour over the course of a week. Now, you would expect that a dancer who cuts down so significantly on their overall activity levels would put weight on as a result. But while following the exact same diet, when their activity levels drastically went down, their muscle mass increased and their body fat decreased. This isn't something, again, that I saw once. It's something I saw time and time again. And so by doing less, it means that there's more recovery time, which seems to somehow or the other with high intensity training to lead to increased weight loss and increased muscle mass. And then there are more examples in terms of weight loss. The clients that I've had over the years that have all crossed the 100-pound weight loss barriers were the ones that did the least. People who tend to do things like cardio on their off days or a lot of exercise-based activities on their off days, and the idea of trying to lose weight faster or lose more weight, always seem to lose less weight than those who didn't do much of anything in between their workouts. Now, that might sound completely irrational, but none of this in any shape or form is defying the fundamental laws of physics. It's just simple biology. The problem is, in the fitness industry, when people talk about energy expenditures, they talk about it from a bit of an outdated perspective. In that, initially, when we were trying to understand how much energy human beings were expending while doing activity, you'd use a setup that would essentially put a gas mask over an individual while they did some kind of cardiovascular activity and then measure how much energy was expended. Pretty simple concept, and it's how we know how much energy more or less is expended doing different activities. But there's a problem with that, in that none of those procedures took into consideration what happened after the activity. And it was only when we were able to do something called full room kilometry, where we were able to put individuals into a room, measure how much energy they expended during an activity, and then over the course of 24 to 48 hours, seeing exactly what happened to them metabolically, were we really able to see that there's a bit of a problem with just simply measuring activity expenditures. For example, if someone does a cardiovascular activity that causes them to expend about 200 kilocalories, what happens over the next 24 to 48 hours is that the amount of energy that their body expends on an hourly basis is going to slowly be reduced until it compensates for that 200 extra calories that were burned, putting them back into equilibrium with the amount of calories that their bodies usually expend. Now, that might sound completely irrational, but if you think about it from an evolutionary point of view, it makes perfect sense. If it was that our ancestors had to expend a lot of energy in their activity levels, we probably wouldn't be here. Keeping in mind that in our ancestral environment, without supermarkets and restaurants and everything else, all the food that you were able to ingest were food that you either hunted or gathered, which requires a significant amount of actual activity to get those foods. And so it makes sense that our body can be conservative in doing everything possible to minimize the amount of calories used if we perform a large amount of activity. And again, there are a lot of studies out there that back this up. The Hadza are hunter-gatherers, and they spend a lot of time walking for miles and miles hunting and foraging. And measurement of their daily total energy expenditure surprisingly found that their expenditures were identical to that of sedentary Westerners, which suggests that even major differences in terms of your overall activity levels have little to do with overall energy expenditure, which means that prevalences of obesity come primarily, as I said, from differences in energy intake, what you eat, rather than activity levels. Problem is we don't have enough studies that really look into this in terms of how that relates to muscle mass. In that, my experience over the years has always been that individuals who train 3 times a week always seem to put on more muscle mass, lose more body fat than those training more. And anytime someone put any type of steady state cardio into that mix, their results were always drastically less. And again, this is not a diss against cardio.
No way.
It's not me saying you should never do it or it's bad for you, but it's me giving you my observations of what I've seen having trained hundreds of men and women over the course of 3 decades. The short answer is no. Every single time I've gone for a stress test, I've always scored in the top 1 percentile. And I've even had people arguing with me that I must be doing cardio or running or something that and the other, because there's no way my fitness levels can be so high as someone who only lifts weights. But it's all I do. Bear in mind that the cardiovascular system supports the muscular system, not the other way around. So if you train your muscles at extremely high intensity the way that I do, you will increase significantly your cardiovascular fitness. And like I said before, for those who have limited amounts of time but are seeking maximum fitness, this is a game changer. And again, this is not my idea. It's not what I think things should be or how I think things are. It's what I've observed. And it's also the reason why this channel exists. A lot of what I see people talking about in the fitness world doesn't actually correlate with what I've seen and observed with actual human beings over the course of decades. To whom much is given, much is expected, which is why I always try to share my knowledge with you. And I hope that the information I put out here helps you have a perspective based on repeatable outcomes that you can then take that information and apply it to your own training with regards to achieving your goals. So I know you have a lot of comments and questions about this. Do be sure to put them below. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, Excelsior.